name is Michael Gershkovich. At work, they call me Chef Mike. I'm the chef proprietor of Mike's Bistro in Manhattan. I live with my family in Englewood, New Jersey, and it's a beautiful place. But sometimes, I need to get away. I need a change of scenery to relax and to be inspired. Please join me on my fun weekend. Brisket is one of the most traditional, most representative of our culture food that exists. I chose second cut brisket, and here's why. Firstly, it's cheaper. But most importantly, I think it's more luxurious. This preparation technique that I'm going to show you is about as simple as it gets. This is called a daube, D-A-U-B-E. And it is also a classic French technique, and it implies almost a smothering, almost an envelope. Have you ever seen the fish dish where they do en papillote, where they put the meat inside of parchment paper? Imagine a brisket en papillote. That's what we're talking about here. So let's get started. And first, let's look at the packaging again. You see it's got that prime label, which means that it comes from a fattier, younger cow, which is going to mean more flavor because of the fat and more tenderness. And that's why we chose it. First, observe that there's no liquid on the bottom. If there was a lot of liquid on the bottom, you'd know that this meat was sitting in the case for a very long time. I touch it first. I look for tackiness. I get none of that. It's smooth, it's clean. My hand is clean after touching it. We see that we have a thicker end and we have a thinner end. That may pose a problem, and it is possible that some of this might overcook. So I'm just going to fold that over just like that to make it even. Then I'm going to season it in what would be traditionally known as a dry rub. But what it does do is it helps preserve the integrity of the meat. And what causes that integrity to be preserved? Whenever you have a combination of salt and sugar, it's essentially a preservation technique. So this dry rub, like most dry rubs, has brown sugar and salt. Today I'm going to use a combination of brown sugar and salt, some dry thyme, a little bit of allspice, which is whole, some Valencia orange peel, which is exactly what it sounds like. Valencia orange peels that are dry, and a little smoked paprika. The oranges and the paprika, smoked paprika, go very well together. That is a classic Spanish combination of oranges and smoked paprika. I'm gonna salt the meat because the salt is the part that scares me. I don't want to overdo that. And then I'm going to create a little mixture of sugar and spices. So let's put in some brown sugar, little smoked paprika, a pinch of thyme leaves, some allspice, and some orange peel, a little black pepper as well. You know something? These bay leaves that are fresh, I always say they have this flavor of eucalyptus meets bubble gum. I'm going to put that right in. I'll mix this rub, and we'll just season it. A dry rub, right? It's dry and I'm rubbing it. Get it? Get it? It's a dry rub. Give it a massage. Don't be afraid. Put it in there. I'm going to seal the top. I'm going to pick up the sides. And then just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do it again. Cute little package. This goes right in the oven. Right onto the rack. Make sure you keep a pan underneath it. Just in case it explodes, it drips right into the pan that's in the bottom of the oven. Today I'm going to do this real slow at around 275 degrees. It's going to take 3 hours. Is that a guarantee? No. It could take 2.5. I would check it after 2.5. Cooking is not a perfect science, but a word of caution. Don't check it for at least an hour and a half. At least. That piece of meat is tough and it's going to take some time. Kabocha squash. Spaghetti squash. and a little baby pumpkin. We put them in the oven to roast until the skins were tender, until we actually felt the softness, and we allowed it to cool. Once this squash is completely cooled, that's when I begin to handle. I'm just going to cut the outside. Just score it in half. And we're going to open that. Take a look at that color. All that flavor was contained. It's not dry. You see it's creamy like butter. Let's remove the unwanted parts. Look how easy that is. Simple, delicate spoon. I'm creating almost a pie shell. We're going to reserve that. Spaghetti squash. I'm just going to put my knife right through it. No effort at all. You see everything is fully cooked and soft. Let's move on to our mini pumpkin. They look like pie shells, don't they? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little salt on the interior. They call this spaghetti squash, and I'm going to turn it into spaghetti right now by using a fork. See how I just turn my wrist as I go into the meat? That creates a wonderful, elegant texture. I can fill this cute little pumpkin with some spaghetti squash. Or maybe even the kabocha could benefit from a little spaghetti squash. A little brown sugar, not a lot. You could serve a squash with squash inside, or maybe some apples, or pears, or pomegranates, or honey. But how easy is that? And believe it or not, the skin is edible as well. The skin is completely edible because it's been roasted. Let's reserve this for later because I think this is going to go great with a second cut brisket. Our second cut brisket has been cooking for 2.5 hours. It is time to check it. We're going to evaluate it for tenderness. It's really fork tender. I can put my tongue right into it and it breaks right off. It's very important with all wet, moist cooking methods, you don't uncover the item too soon. It must cool, covered. That's what causes a lot of briskets and a lot of stews to get stringy and dry, is because you can't take them out of their moist environment until they're cool. So I'm quickly covering that up. Any extra liquid that fell off the side will go into this pan, just like that. And we'll have time to make a beautiful glaze right now with it. Don't go directly into the refrigerator with an extremely hot item. You should certainly let it cool for at least an hour on the counter before going into the refrigerator. Our second cut brisket is fully cooled. Earlier, we removed the liquid, and as you can see, it was separated. The fat came to the top, and the leaner liquid fell to the bottom. If you'd like to remove the fat at this point, it's very easy to just spoon it right off the top. Get rid of that. Now, we have our liquid. We'll reserve that for later. Our meat, fully cooled. Now it's safe to uncover it. What I'm going to be using to reheat this brisket, you see I put a little liquid on the bottom, just like that. Because this was cooked in a moist heat cooking, it needs to be heated in a moist environment. Let's talk about cutting and portioning this second cut brisket. As you can see, the fibers, they run this way. So I have to cut it in this direction. How thick do I want to cut this? Well, that's a matter of taste. Some people love super thin cut brisket. I think that's risky because if I cut it super thin and then I go to heat it up and it sits warm for an extended period of time, that meat can easily be overcooked. I prefer smaller pieces. Let people take what they want to eat. It's how do I know if I did a good job? Well, let's get a close look at this. You see, I could stretch it, and there's a web, but it still separates very easily. It just kind of falls apart, right? It's not resisting me. If there was no web, then it would be dry in my mouth. If it was too strong, it would be like chewing gum. I'm going to cut it in about 3/4 inch thick slices. I think that's a tasteful size. I'm going to go across the grain. Let's arrange this in a nice way. Now, I wouldn't expose too much of the meat because you don't want it to dry out. So you want to slice it, but you don't want to open it all the way. You see I have that little bit of liquid on the bottom. Don't be afraid to put it all inside. Even if you have a couple of scraps, find a place to put it. Now I have to decide how to make the top look pretty. From this liquid, I'm going to prepare a glaze to coat the top. Put that right into a pan. So I want to taste this liquid. The salt is perfect. It doesn't need any more salt. Maybe I'll splash a little wine in it. Wine has acid, and that'll create a little bit of a balance, a little bit of a zip. No different than squeezing in lemon juice. And you see I didn't put in that much. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to bring this to the fire. We're going to thicken it up with a little slurry of cornstarch, reinforce it with a bay leaf and a little bit of checked rosemary. And we're going to begin creating a glaze for this brisket. We have everything we need to finish our brisket. Our brisket is sliced. We put our squash in from earlier into a nice cast iron pan. We have the drippings that we've added a little red wine to, and we're bringing it to a simmer right now. What we're going to do is we're going to thicken it with a little bit of cornstarch. We're going to create a slurry with about equal parts of starch and water. And we're going to add it to our simmering liquid that came off of our ribs. Remember, there was no water added to this. This is the pure essence of that second cut brisket. It's the liquid that came off of the meat. It's highly concentrated with flavor and the spices that we used. Our braising liquid is warming up. Our liquid is boiling. We're going to introduce our slurry and we're going to stir. Remember, you can always add more, but it's really hard to take it away. That should do. We're going to bring that to a boil and you'll see the white color will go away and it will become clear. I would like to add a little black pepper to that. You see that? You see how thick it just got? Right now this is nappe. You see how it coats the back of my spoon? That's called nappe, right? The way it coats the back of my spoon is the way it's going to coat the brisket. So now I'm going to take that, I'm just going to glaze the brisket. I'm going to glaze it. Make sure to save some so that you have some right before presentation. Finish glazing that, we're going to go right to the oven with it. Our second cut brisket has been cut, reheated, glazed. Our pumpkin and our squash and our spaghetti squash and kabocha squash have all been cooked. They're all ready to come out. We have a little extra glaze here that was left over that we could throw on top of the meat. If you could see, we have our pumpkin stuffed with spaghetti squash. We could just open that up. It's people see what's inside. We can use our dry rub that we made earlier. We could drizzle that flavor right in there, and maybe on top of our kabocha squash here as well. Maybe present a couple of fresh herbs, some thyme, some rosemary. We'll make a nice smell and a wonderful presentation. This is ready to come out. Some fresh bay leaves. We can carry this to the table just as it is.